Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the World War II Daily Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, Jenny, who runs the Pacific Atrocities Education, and she allowed us to make two interviews last year, one with Quim Cho and the other one with Jinbi Chen. Those interviews were awesome. If you didn't see them, you can check them out in this channel and watch them fully. Before we go in, I want to address the passing of my good friend Cesar Campiani last week. We interviewed him on episode 12 of this show. You can also check that out. He was the biggest specialist of the Brazilian Expeditionary Force in the world. So I'm just remembering him a little bit here, and you can check out his interview on episode 12. With all that said, don't forget to follow us on Instagram for daily World War II content at World War II _ and at Samuel.decorti. Samuel has been doing a lot of stuff and it's been around in the media and everything, and you can check and learn a lot in his page as well. So let's go with no further ado. Jenny, please introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and the stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And also my suggested guests, one of them was Dr. Jin B. Chan, who survived World War II in Asia, and Quinn Cho, who is doing a fellowship at Pacific Atrocities Education. I first started this organization because I knew there was a gap between what was taught in school and also what is talked about at home about World War II. My grandma would never allow me to watch like anime in front of her. So my parents were working and my grandma was babysitting me, and she would get very upset whenever I turned on the anime. Like my favorite was Doraemon, which was about blue robotic cat who went from the future to kind of get his inventor to stop being a loser, and that was like my favorite anime. But my grandma would say something like, oh, the Japanese people are evil, those turnip heads never listen to what they're saying and whatnot. And so then at first I thought that my grandma was just racist and something is wrong with her. But then after she passed away, we actually found like a box of military yen and rice rationing coupons in her belongings. And then later, after I read more about World War II, I realized that she probably suffered through the occupation of Hong Kong in World War II. And after college, I had a very boring job and that I didn't really want to do, and I started reading more into like World War II, and also like in Asia what really happened to my grandma. And I stumbled across Rape of Nanking, and also like other books like The Rising Sun by John Toland. And in America, how we learned about the Pacific War is that we watch a movie on Pearl Harbor and then the atomic bomb, and then that's done. You don't know what happened in between, you don't know what happened before. And so it's, in a way, it was very interesting for me to watch that. To learn more about it, because then I realized that it's not, World War II didn't start with Pearl Harbor per se. It happened like 10 years before Pearl Harbor, with Japan invading Manchuria. And it's also, and if you think about it, 30 million people died. That's like the lower estimate, and the higher estimate is like 42 million, and like tens of millions from China. But we never really, and like if you read about Rape of Nanking, it's only 300,000 people. So then it's like a fraction of the fraction of like suffering, and it's still so horrific. And so then I was looking for like a nonprofit to work at, maybe as an analyst, to pursue this kind of hobby and passion. Because by that point, I think I've read like maybe 5 books into this topic. And I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find a nonprofit related to World War II in Asia. If you guys stumble across anything, let me know. Like they're always very specific, like the Philippines and whatnot. And I'm not saying that it's not good, but like you need to kind of look at it in a very global perspective as well. And so then I was very naive and thought, well, maybe I can start something. And so that was how I started the nonprofit 10 years ago. And yeah, that's a little bit about myself.
Yeah, I'm engaged with a lot with the history of Korea. And by the way, I might go to Korea again next year. So, um, and no, I've never seen any organization like that. No, never. Yours was the Pacific Atrocities Education was the first one, and that's why I think we connected so well because we were in need of like. So my son just arrived here. Samuel, can you proceed to the next question, please?
Okay, so you talked about your project, the Pacific Atrocities Education, and it focuses on educating the public about war crimes or crimes in the Pacific. You mentioned it briefly, but can you expand on what motivated you to create it and what the gaps are in the historical education that you're trying to address?
Yes. So in the West, we learn a lot about the Holocaust, and I'm not trying to like compare atrocities here, but I think it's also it's very much needed, especially given today's geopolitical environment and also the rise of China to understand the historical memory that shapes China today. And a lot of people don't understand the whole historical picture of the last century of China, which went from the century of humiliation to um, the invasion of China from 1931 to 1945, where tens of millions of people died, and it was such a weak nation that they needed to like get stronger. And this historical memory shaped their policy. And what's interesting is that like in the West, me included, I did not have an understanding of that, especially when I was watching like Western media. I think like in my late teens and my early 20s, I used to think that China is this very evil country. And but then after I realized and learned more about like historical context, and it really bridges the gap in my knowledge about like historical memory, not only in China but also in Asia. I think Pietro and I were talking about how the Koreans they're still holding protests every Wednesday um in front of Japanese embassy, and there's no way for us to actually understand why they're doing that without learning more about World War II and also learning more about historically what had happened between Japan and its neighbors. I mean, in the case of Korea, it happened even before World War II. It happened like in 1910, and the historical trauma is still lingering on until today. And it's just and I think that's the thing that the West needs to know, and like more of the public needs to know to create more of historical understanding, and to also give more context of what is happening today and how it relates to modern history.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm sorry. My son is here with me, and I guess that life happens. This is going to be in the episode, anyways. But yeah, so can we continue from? I'm actually lost, to be honest with you. I was trying to deal with the little uh
Yeah, no worries.
Johnny
The kids
boy
are so cute.
here.
That's why I
I'm
was
sorry.
laughing a little bit. I saw he was like, "Ooh."
Yeah, I had to mention this because oh I had to mention this because I knew that at some point we are going to record an episode that my son was going to be hanging around. That it was going to be impossible not to happen because it's only my wife and him, and it's just three of us here. But anyways, let's continue. Let's carry on. Now he went away. I'm not even gonna edit this out. Just leave it here. That's life the way it is, guys. Yes. So I'm really sorry. So let's continue from for those unfamiliar with it. How would you explain? Oh yeah. So let's get into context a little bit from what happened. Like you were talking about the atrocities the Japanese committed, and I was in Korea this year. I was talking about that, and they go every Wednesday in front of the Japanese embassy to protest. And there's a lot of denial surrounding this story, as much as there is with Nazi propaganda nowadays and all of that. We discuss a lot on Instagram, right?
Yeah,
It's
it's
a very
crazy because you can post about anything, right? I mean, I feel like once you start posting about like comfort women, oh, it all hell breaks loose. And I think 10 years ago when I first visited this comfort woman in China, and at the time, it's not like today where I think the media is like softening a little bit, and also, voices like ours is getting a little bit more stronger. Like at that time, the conversation was very one sided, and so I posted about this Chinese comfort woman. I got doxxed right away. They were like coming at me, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I've never like posted something online that gets so controversial and like get so many arguments. And I was talking about how one of the comfort women had to survive like basically Japanese brutality, and she was raped like 10, 15 times a day, and I interviewed her in 2015. And these online commenters and trolls were relentless in commenting. They were like, oh, these are high paid prostitutes, blah blah blah. And I had just come back from like this trip to China, and like I've seen so many of these people who suffered. And just to do that, it was like not only was I facing emotional toll from like what I saw happened to them and like how they live their lives now, it's also like it's also like really hard to like fight a bunch of people who are like so radicalized in their ideas, and like are obviously living in another reality than like what other people's reality was. And it's also very insensitive for me to watch that happen. And so for a while, we even shut down our Instagram account because I was too scared. And it's, I mean, so thank you guys. I mean, due to people like you that we can continue this fight and, continue with this kind of dialogue online, even though that sometimes is really scary. And like it took me 2 years to actually emotionally digest what those women went through and how horrible it was, the war for them. And yeah, the book is called Undrowning Lotus. Thank you for reminding me, Pedro, about comfort women and posting about about war crimes in on Instagram. I think that historical denial is a very scary thing. I think because it's like it's such a bad thing that they did that they're thinking about covering up. And so if that's the case, then why not just not do it and not have done it at all? And the case with like Korean comfort women too, like, it, it's awful because in a way, the United States handed Korea to Japan since 1910. And a lot of people in the United States don't understand that context. They don't see that United States as like an imperial power who just go and like get other people's country. Like in school, we don't learn about United States as an imperial power at all. We learn about like maybe, oh, the Friends are the bad the French were the bad guys. They were like imperialistic. The British were the bad guys.
British. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always the British who's the
British.
bad guy. Yeah, but then we never learned that the United States was actually also an imperial power, just by like their involvement in the Pacific. And so with our like bi-weekly podcast with James Bradley, we also dive into that a little bit because the United States also sold opium. I mean, I think the British were the biggest guys in selling opium. They sold like 70%. So if you think about it, Queen Victoria was like the biggest dope dealer in history. Like American Revolution also used some of that dope money to also like fund their industrial revolution. So it's interesting, and we're not trying to see history like who's wrong, who's right, but just to provide context to things so that people can understand more about what is happening in our modern world.
So you mentioned comfort woman, and I was thinking about something because so I live in the Netherlands, and at that time, the Netherlands also had colonies like in Indonesia.
Yes,
And what happened
Jan.
in Indonesia is that one of my old neighbors, she was an older woman. I used to work in her garden, those kind of things. But she was from Indonesia. She had experienced World War II there, and she had been in a Japanese internment camp. And at that time, she was a younger woman.
He's gone.
Um, and one time for a school
Can you hear me,
project, I
Jenny?
interviewed her, and like she spoke about her experiences during World War II. But she also mentioned, yeah, where something like this popped up, like something like the comfort women, because the Japanese military had entered the camp. The camp was so it was like a all women camp and maybe some younger boys. But yeah, it was only women there. And then the Japanese military had entered the camp to take away some of the young women, most likely to be used as comfort women. And what happened is that she told me this is that the woman in charge of all the women in the camp, um, she said that the men were not taking away any of the women. They were just not taking away any of them, and if they wanted to take someone, they were going to take her and no one else. And
Wow.
for some reason, she did manage to prevent that anyone else was taken. No one was taken that day, not even her. So the soldiers left again without taking any women from the camp. And sometimes I think about this event because it's like, imagine they had
Hold on,
taken.
hold on. Do you think it recorded the moment I was
Yes, it's
out?
still recording. Yes, it's still
Put it. Okay,
recording.
so carry on. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sorry. So
Oh. No, so it's just that's what I was thinking about because that is imagine they had taken some of these women from the camp, then these would have been used most likely as comfort women and suffered horribly because of it.
yeah, and I mean, it's not like they just suffer through it and then that was the end of it. Some of the women I interview, one of them had like a baby afterward, and her mom didn't know what to do, and her mom said, "Okay, we're just going to go over here," and then they end up like burying this baby in a cave, and then just never talked about it again. And it's that kind and it, because in Asia it's such a taboo topic to talk about topics like this, so she only talked about it when she was older. But I mean, you can think about like how much that actually brought, I mean, with how much pain that brought to her, to have to go through this kind of experience. And even for me, when I interviewed them in like 2015, I felt very uncomfortable just hearing it secondhand. And so I think that's why like we need to tell more of those stories, and it's going to be those stories that are uncomfortable, but it's the stories that need to be told. And I'm not trying to like sensationalize any of the stories. It's just what had happened.
Yeah, but it's also these are important stories. These women, they lived with like these events. They had to live with it for the rest of their lives.
Yes.
It left a huge impact. Yeah, sorry, I can only imagine that the trauma that these women had after the war, and
Yes,
then
exactly.
to be in a situation where it's like, okay, this is like an uncomfortable topic. Let's not talk about it too much. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's horrible.
It is, and it is a topic that you see many of the history pages on Instagram completely ignore this aspect of World War II. Like Asia is barely talked about, but like this aspect of the war in Asia is even worse. So yeah,
Yes.
but
So
yeah, let's dive into uh, Unit 731. There's a kid right now. So yeah, Unit 731 conducted human experimentation on a massive scale. Why is it important to confront these details directly rather than solve them or avoid them?
Yeah, I think human suffering is a big part of World War II, and and especially with scientists and doctors, expect the best out of your scientists and your doctors. Doctors, swear an oath where they're going to do no harm. But when I was going through like Unit 731, what the doctors were doing, what they were up to, how they saw humans as logs, Maruta versus like seeing them as humans, it was very desensitized and very disturbing for me to see that as well. When I was reading these pages about like human experimentations, and you can see like the sample goes from like 3-year old to like 80-year old, and on like experiments on like how the plague would work on humans, or like um anthrax, how to harm humans. And that's I think, and ethically that cross a line in what I'm thinking about when I'm like thinking about doctors and scientists. And Ishishiro, the guy who founded this um Unit 731, was not just like a rogue individual. He had state funding. The emperor gave him money because he was so impressed with Ishishiro. And Ishishiro had like a whole plan of, weaponizing germ warfare to make it so that Japan can become this world power. And it's important to note that we never know how many people died from human experimentations alone in World War II. In Unit 731 especially, because they were able to conquer a whole village and evict everyone, and then build like 150 buildings to have, and then continuously have these humans into their biological lab. And so they start from like 0 to 1,000, and some of the records are now even suggesting that it's not just Unit 731. They also had other like biological labs. Like we interviewed a guy on our channel, 1644. His father worked at like 1644, and I was asking him like, oh, do you know more details than that? He was telling me like, oh no, I have no idea. I just found all these things in the attic. People think I'm an expert, but even he doesn't know. Like, and his father worked in these labs. And like when you go and read all these like, so for example, we went through this Yokohama war crimes trial, and this is like one of the only instances where we actually can read about how the victim reacted, like, and it's like court document, so we know for sure it's like true. And like a group of B-29 bombers crew got shut down over Tokyo, and while trying to firebomb Tokyo. And these villagers caught them, and then some of them died right away, and then some were taken to go do uh to be human experimented on. And and when I was reading like the doctors and like the nurses testimony, it was terrifying, because like the pilots thought that they were going to be saved, and that they were going to a hospital, but little did they realize that they're being pushed to like be human experimented on at like Kyushu, in front of Kyushu Imperial University at a college lecture. And so it's like what I was saying earlier, when you see doctor and nurses and like scientists, you think they're good guys, but then it's like the war was so dark that they became really bad. And it's just like what happens if to society when even people we think are going to be helping are become really bad and they have like a systematic way of killing people. And recently, like I even got like one of the family members who were vivisected contacted us to talk about how important it is to keep these stories alive, because it's um uh, Jack, I think Cole Howard was like one of three siblings, and that basically took away a third of their household just by him being vivisected. And think about how many other victims who were vivisected and how many other lives, how many other families have that part of family missing because they were used for human experimentation. And it was not just human experimentation that Unit 731 did as well. They also did like biological weapons launching. So we all know about Doolittle raid, but the raid that happened right after Pearl Harbor because FDR was pissed off. But we don't know about how like Doolittle raid. We didn't know about this for decades, but now we know for sure that for so right after Doolittle raid, the way to get out of Japan was to either, because we United States didn't have the Marianas yet, so it was either through China or through Russia, or actually the people who flew to Russia got captured, or you're going to die, right? And so some pilots chose to fly through China, and they ended up in like Zhejiang area, and Japan got really mad about that decision and how the Chinese villagers were helping the Doolittle raiders to escape, basically. And so what ended up happening was something super dark. They ended up spraying biological weapons to people's like limbs, to people who were living in the village. And so for decades after the war, they ended up with like wounds that would never heal because Unit 731 um, uh, had sprayed biological weapons on that village, like anthrax and glanders. And I'm going to share my screen so that you guys can see these photos of these people who lived through, like, I mean, it was just, it's decades of this suffering. And it wasn't until like 2014 that they realized that, oh, the way to cure it is by skin grafting. And some people's limbs even fell off. And this is like, I'm talking about like decades after the war when they're working on the field, because Unit 731 has sprayed so much on the, on onto these people's land. And like, so this is like how they were living with this kind of skin issues. So some who did not contract it so badly, they only have this kind of like skin issues, and so then like the skin would flake off. And like some people can never wore socks, like even decades after the war. He would just live with like legs like that. And this person's actually getting better from like some skin grafting and whatnot. Like, and this is called like rotten leg disease. And this is for decades after the war. People were living in like with like rotten leg disease. And this woman named Wang Shen brought Japanese court to go to court, and they actually admitted that they did it, but they would not pay reparation. And what's even more like heartbreaking is that some people never able to wear socks or like lost their livelihood because of that. And so I think that when people think about Unit 731 and like human experimentation, they also need to think about what was then produced and attacked and used to attack for other people. And we normally don't think about like war and like battles and then retaliation, but this is exactly what had happened. Pearl Harbor eventually got Doolittle to happen, and then Doolittle raiders who landed in China caused the anger from the Japanese to then take it on, and like basically take take these villagers to like basically a very nasty disease and like devastated the whole town, and these people suffered in silence until like 2000 when they went to court, and the Japanese court admitted that it happened.
Interesting because people. No, no, go ahead, Sam.
It's horrible that these things happened. And what I'm also thinking about is also the mindset that you need to do some of these things. Like, say you're going to college, like you're studying to become a doctor, and it's like, okay, like for today's class, the professor is going to cut open like a living person. Like, this is not just like
Right.
it's not just just opening up like someone who's already dead or something. No, it's like, okay, this is a living person, and that person is going to die so that you can like study. And it's, yeah, it's horrible, the mindset that you need in order to carry out these
Yes,
things.
and it's very morbid because at that time, because Ishishiro had gotten so much funding from the Japanese government, that every scientist and every doctor basically looked up to him. And that's how it became like a systematic thing. So like imagine like one day that your society gets to that point where like, let's say this tech billionaire raised a lot of money doing something super evil, and then now everyone wants to do the same thing. It's kind of like that, and that's how like money becomes this greed, this force to drive this greed and drive all these evil like experimentations.
What I was going to say is that um, usually people say that during World War II there wasn't nobody used chemical or biological weapons, but in fact Japan used it, right?
Yes.
I didn't know about these Chinese villages, but I always hear about the bubonic plague in Nanjing. I think they
Hmm.
dropped like fleas right into the city.
Yes, and the flea bombs were also created by Unit 731. Yes, it's called a flea bomb. And so it's interesting because after the US captured the after the United States captured the scientists, when they found Ishishiro actually pretended that he died, and then the CIA found him with his pet monkey, and then he was like, and I read all the interrogation. At first, he was trying to do the bomb with like metal, but then he realized that if you drop a metal, it's not going to dissipate. The fleas are not going to be able to go so fast out into like the open and whatnot. So then he was actually very genius by coming up with the ceramic bomb. So then when you put the fleas in there and then the ceramic bomb falls onto the ground, it scatters, and then boom, you have a whole plague going on. And so it's terrifying to think that there are people who spend energy into thinking like how to do the most evil, what is the most evil way to kill people. And biological weapon is not like something that is like, oh, you can just spray some bleach on it and it's all good, you can clean it, whatever. It's like it takes decades to remove, and there are like consequences like of people who want to work on the land and then end up with like rotten legs and like legs limbs falling off due to all of these issues.
Yeah, it just makes me think as well about in Korea where I visited Sodemong prison, and the Japanese used the prison. It was built by Koreans to lock up on other Koreans. But when Japan occupied it, took the prison and used it. And I remember I was talking to Samuel. It was my first opportunity to go to a place like that, that felt sort like a kind of like a concentration camp, and that was a terrible place. Like, and you can they have you can see the torture chambers. You can see the torture techniques. You can get inside of the Iron Maidens and everything, and kind of feel the experience of what was to be there. But anyways,
Oh, can I just
well,
show
please,
one more picture, please?
yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
please.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
this man actually, his whole like leg fell off because he had contracted too much like glanders and like anthrax, and so then it just wasn't like it penetrated through his bones and whatnot. And this is the woman Wan Shen who brought these people to like Japanese court for like decades to fight for justice for them. Yeah.
It
But
is. Yeah, go ahead.
uh, so this is we were talking about like atrocities, massacres, and horrible things that have happened, and I was just curious because we mentioned several already. But are there also some others that you're thinking about? Like, okay, this is also important to share, or you need to know about
Yes.
these events. Okay.
Yeah, I think slave labor is another issue that's really intense during World War II because I'm currently reading going through the Mukden and Hokden. It's actually current day is called Shenyang, but when Mitsubishi took over, it was called Hokden or Mukden. And these camps where these people were doing labor, forced labor, was awful. I was reading this diary where this British soldier was talking about like, oh, today an American died, today an American died, and it's just like every day there were like Americans who were dying on these like Mitsubishi camps, and it's also very interesting to see that like today we don't talk about it. And during World War II, there was also this mining site called the Aso mines, and this prime minister who was in power in like I think the 2010s, Taro Aso, his family is related to the Aso mines. And what's interesting is that like unlike the German atrocities that had happened or like the German war crimes, these people are back in power. You know, the CIA was then in the was was basically participating in helping Japan to secure um, LDP in particular to secure that funding. So then these war criminals become went from war criminals to prime minister within a decade. And that is the kind of like things that we don't learn about in history. And that's the kind of like and I just think that it's not just atrocities, it's also like the power to cover up all these atrocities that makes it scary. So it's not like it's like systematic brutality plus cover up. It's not like just one atrocity alone, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it does. And how do you how do you guys balance accuracy with ethical responsibility when teaching or speaking about such violence and suffering? How do you balance that?
I we
If
just
you
talk
do,
about what happened. Like I'm not trying to add any shock value to it because it's just what happened. And that's why we also prioritize in like getting primary sources documents so that we can talk more accurately about what had happened. And I don't know really how to like add ethics into it because it's like okay, I criticize that it's like super scary for society to not have like ethical scientists, and like I'm not in the science field, and so it's also really important for me to get feedback on what other people are saying about this kind of scientists. In fact, one of our biggest funder is was an NIH scientist, and she read about these stories, and she's like, "Wow, this is what happens when science is like missing that kind of like humanities," and that's why she donated, and she wanted to help to uncover and also tell these stories because she can see that the consequences are high, are like really nasty when you don't have humanities with science.
perfect. Yes. Do you wanna add something, Samuel?
Not immediately. I'm just curious because um, these are horrible things that have happened, but I can also imagine that, like, sometimes the audience might not fully understand. Like, okay, say you say, like, okay, today an American died, tomorrow another American died, the day after an American died. Like, the audience can understand that because it's like a handful of people. But for some of these atrocities, it's like, okay, we are going to experiment on 1,000 people, and that's just for this time period, and then we proceed with the next. I can imagine that it might sometimes also be challenging to bring across, like, hey, so many people died. It's like it's such a large number that it might sometimes be hard to fully comprehend.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. When I'm reading like some of the papers, I really don't have any idea about like what a total war is. I don't understand. Like I can never imagine dying from by like vivisection, right? And so it's that's the kind of thing that I worry about sometimes. Like, am I telling the complete picture? And like the scale of atrocities too. It was just so incredibly large that it's not like I can imagine that happening. So I hope to like describe it as much of as in context as possible. But nowadays, I feel like my audience, I love my audience, but I feel like people in this current generation, we're all affected by brain rot at a certain extent. And so then, like, our shorts would do well. Like, we have like 40 seconds to tell a story, sometimes even 10 seconds to tell a story. And so I always tell people to go watch the whole thing, the whole like video, if you want to learn more. Or like when we're doing like carousel like posts, I tell people, hey, you need to read more about this topic. This like post is just the beginning of an understanding of what had happened. The large scale of thing is really, it's unbelievable. It's like tens of millions of people. And it's not something that our mind can think about, in terms of numbers. And I remember when I was reading The Rape of Nanking, she put it so clearly, like this is amount of like, if you pack this train car like all the way to the top, this is like, and she's describing 300,000 people. We're like trying to talk about like the millions of people who died. And so that's why I think our it's very hard to complete our work. And that's why I've been, when I was trying to start this nonprofit, I was very naive because I was thinking, oh, I can do this in a few years, but it's actually harder than that.
Yeah, I was going to say that one picture in particular from the war in Asia completely transformed my perception of the war, because I had this very naive thinking about the war. It's like what kind of what we fight today on Instagram. Like people, I used to be like the tank, gun, battle guy, and then I was scrolling through pictures from, I think it was a bombing in Nanjing, but they bombed the train station, and there's like a baby sitting in the station. The
That's,
baby's all, you know
yeah,
the
Bloody
picture?
Shanghai. That's Bloody
Shanghai,
Saturday. Yes, that's from Bloody
good,
Saturday. I can
bloody
pull up
I
Saturday.
that.
I don't. Can you show the image?
Yes,
Just
I
for
can.
my
I'm going to
perception.
show that image right now. It's a very well-known picture from Shanghai. And yeah, that's the humanity of war. Yeah, so you used to post only tanks and planes.
Yeah, yes, that's the picture. Perfect. That's the one. Terrifying one. I was about to become a father and I saw this and I was like, okay. Um, and it changed my entire perception of the war, especially in the Pacific. I started to look into the atrocities the Japanese committed. But yeah, that's the picture. Yeah. But anyways, so I think it's also important to mention before we go any further that most of these crimes, or not all of them, you correct me if I'm wrong, Jenny, they were also motivated by ethnicity, right? The
Yes,
Japanese, as I don't like to compare please. uh, I don't want to compare the Germans with the Japanese, but there was also these ethnic aspect to it, right?
yes. So because Japan had already adopted the Western ways, so they call themselves, like, even I think Teddy Roosevelt called them the Yankees of the East, and Teddy Roosevelt was the one who handed Korea to Japan, to give people historical context. And so they already saw themselves as such. And Kishi Nobusuke, who is the grandpa of Shinzo Abe, he also had like a lot of like racial theories in his journal and whatnot. He once said that Chinese people are like toilet water and Japanese people are like the pure water. I'm paraphrasing. And that you cannot mix the toilet water with clean water because that's going to dilute the clean water. And so even at unit 731 you can see that there are clearly two incinerators, and the two incinerators because the Japanese scientists also die from biological weapons and whatnot, and from experiments gone wrong. And then they had a separate incinerator for the Japanese scientists, and then they had a separate incinerator for the victims who were experimented on. So even in death, you must separate the two. And so, and when you understand that racial like hierarchy, then you understand why they were able to dehumanize other people and commit so many war crimes.
All right, so as we start to move towards the end of this interview, I always like to make this question. What lessons do you believe the history of the Japanese atrocities in the Pacific and Unit 731 in particular still holds for the world today?
Yeah, I think science with ethics is the most important way to move our society forward. We can, like, what gets on my nerves is that people are like, oh, we need to have more science, we need to move it forward. But, like, what if your society gets taken over by, like, scientists who don't care about how other people, like, what the results are, how the consequences play out? For some of these Chinese villagers, it ended up to be decades of consequences after the biological attack. So I think that's like one of the bigger lessons is like no matter doing like what you're doing, humanity is important because it also guides you in the way that we're not leading ourselves into like the most catastrophic outcome.
And that's why it's so important to have people like you, people like Samuel, and what we try to do here. It's a constant battle against denial and misinformation and everything, but we are here holding tight. Um, so this finishes all the questions we had, but I want to invite you, Jenny, to provide us with your last words and last thoughts. I want also to thank you very much for dedicating your time to us in such a crazy manner. There's a lot of things going on here in my house, in Samuel's lives as well. So we are all trying to adapt to new realities here. But yeah, give us your final thoughts, please. We appreciate a lot your presence here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Happy Chinese New Year if I haven't said it yet. And if you
Thank you.
guys want to learn more and like go on our website pacificatrocities.org. And yeah, thank you so much for having me today.
All the links mentioned in this app. So there's a thunderstorm going on out there. So I don't know if you can
Yeah, me
hear
too.
the thunder here, but anyways,
My whole
all the
house shook just now. Like the whole house was shaking and my dog was like scared
really
next to me. Yeah.
okay. That's crazy. Yeah, this is the time of the year for thunderstorms to happen here in Brazil. So it's I was hoping for the internet to stay stable, but hopefully it went good. Yeah. So I even forgot what I was going to say. But anyways,
The links
thank
the
you.
links will be all in the description. Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, the links will be all in the description of this episode. To find, you can also find Jenny on Instagram. She posts every day. She's very active on Twitter as well. All the links will be here, right? And if you want to go for some polemic, you're gonna find that on Twitter, right, Jenny? I know that for a fact.
Yeah, and also subscribe to this channel if you haven't already.
Oh, thank you, Samuel. Any final words? It's like It's like I'm asking like your final words if you're like going to die, but it's not. It's good. It's just the end of the episode. Relax, people. Yeah, but
Right.
anyways, Thank you very much for coming to the end of this episode. Links are in the description. Thank you very much, and again, in the Pacific Atrocities Education for providing us with so good and constant information. We are also very happy to have you around because you provide us with very good guests for this show. If you came to all the way to the end of this episode, consider subscribing to our channel. It's free. And if you change your mind, you can just unsubscribe and carry on with your life. Thank you very much. We'll see you on the next one here in the World War II Daily podcast.
Thank you.